What's up, everybody? Oh,
Hello there.
Hi. Welcome to another episode of That GD Show. I am Genevieve, as usual. Dave is not here once again. He is fine. He is at a speaking engagement promoting his new book, which, if you haven't bought it, what are you doing? You should do that. Anywho, filling in for Dave is my buddy Rion. Say hello.
Hello there. Hi, everybody. Thank you.
And our fantastic guest tonight, I'm so excited, is the one and only Austin Archer. Austin, how are you doing?
Awesome.
I'm doing great.
Hell yeah.
Love it. Awesome.
Yeah. We had kind of a mad dash to get on the show, so we didn't do our usual pre-show powwow. But I am so excited that you're here. This is going to be awesome. Before we get into anything, I guess I should do the usual, announcements, I guess. It's a YouTube show, so like and subscribe. That is always super helpful. Helps us. I don't know how, but it does. It's more people. And if you really, really love us, send some super chats. I will do my best to watch the chat and read all of them while we are live. And if I miss some, Ethan will yell at me in the private chat. And if you really, really love us, go over and support us on Patreon. It all supports Dave and his fantastic work. He is incredible. We would not have the show without him and all of our amazing volunteers, our call screeners, because this is a call-in show. So if you have any questions for any of us, if you want to just yell at us, feel free to call 217-375-9933. And I think I covered all of that. So let's get to it. So I'm so excited for this conversation. Initially, we were going to have two Mormons on this ex-Mormons, I should say, on this show. But unfortunately, one of our initial guests had to drop out, and Rion is so incredible to jump on last minute. And while you are not an ex-Mormon, you are an ex-Jehovah's Witness. So
oh yeah, close enough.
Yeah.
They're like the cousins of each other. They're like religious cousins. So we have deep roots that go back like hundreds of years. So it's technically similar.
Yeah.
I always kind of think of the similarity from an outsider's perspective, because I am neither an ex-Christian of any kind or an ex-Mormon or an ex-JW. But from what I understand, even like in the mainstream Protestant American Christianity, there's sort of this idea that Catholics aren't real Christians, but like those Mormons and JWs are like a totally crazy cult, which if you grow up in those cultures, you're probably not going to see it as a cult. It's just going to be, is what it is. That's your world.
If we even spoke of something as a cult, it was said, oh, we're not a cult. Of course, we don't drink the Kool-Aid. We're not a cult. I don't know if they said similar things to you, Austin, to kind of steer you away from, no, it couldn't be a cult.
I had no idea what people were talking about when they said that. I heard it all growing up, and I was like, I just felt very misunderstood. I was like, I don't think they understand. Like, we're just like a normal religion. And it wasn't until I was able to like step outside of it a little bit and look with an outsider's lens. And I like stopped going to church when I was like 18, my freshman year of college. And the first time I went back to church, I watched there's this thing that Mormons do in church that they think is really cute, where they little kids will go up and like bear their testimony of the church. They'll go up and they're like 4 or 5 years old, and their parents will whisper in their ear what to say, and they'll like be at a microphone and they'll be like, say that you love the church, and they'll be like, I love the church, and everyone in the audience like thinks it's so cute, and they're like, oh my gosh, it's so precious. And I was watching it, and I was like, oh, this is what people mean when they say I'm in a cult. Oh, it's because it's really weird to do that to little kids, to like have them profess things in front of their community at like 4 and 5 years old. It's really, really weird. And then the first time I saw the temple ceremonies for the Mormons, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm in a very weird cult.
Starts to click. You don't really always see it, and they definitely tone it down, so you don't have that perception. We're just like everybody else, but we're super devoted.
Well, the thing is, though, like we are just like everybody else. Everybody's religion is weird. Like religions are weird.
Religions are a bit weird.
Weird costumes that they wear, and weird hats, and weird things that they recite. And so, like, we are just like everybody else. But like, you think somehow that like yours is, you're in the water that you're in, and it takes being outside of it to realize like you're actually not that unique. Like the structure of your thing is not that unique. It's the same structure that everyone's giving. They're just giving it different names, but it's
control. It's all control.
Yeah.
And it's not a very personal relationship when you have your parents whispering in your ear what you're this is how you feel about God. This is
right.
So much for that personal relationship you're supposed to build.
Right.
What?
Yeah, and like I said, I didn't grow up in any of that. So to me, that kind of just sounds like when I see those like really cringy like tweets on Twitter where it's like, oh my gosh, my child said this, and it's basically like Ernest Hemingway or something. And I'm like, your kid didn't say that. Your kid's 7. They don't really care about all of this stuff. You're just making it up. But I mean, I know that's not entirely what it is at all. But it's interesting, seeing children just sort of being like led to say all of these things. And also just kind of like the trauma too of kind of what goes on behind that from a lot of the friends that I've talked to. It's like the worst thing is being a little kid having nightmares about being sent to hell or your parents aren't home and you're like, oh shit, like did the rapture happen and like everybody's gone but me. And like it's not the same thing as monsters under the bed, even though it kind of is, because your parents are actually there, like the adults in your life are telling you like, no, this is something very real that you should be afraid of. So I can't even imagine with all of that.
Yeah,
it's fun.
Sure. God's watching you masturbate. It's like, it's not cool. It's like,
it's a fun time.
Yeah. Oh my God.
For Austin, nice to meet you, by the way.
Nice to meet you.
Didn't really get a chance to meet you, but I'm curious if it's similar for you. As a JW growing up, we don't have any kind of aspirations other than being in the church. Like, as far as the witnesses are concerned, education is not good to have. You really should only have aspirations to, be a elder or ministerial servant, something like that. Is it similar for Mormons, or are they a little bit more relaxed in that sense?
They're definitely more relaxed in that sense. I mean, like, I'm always surprised that anybody makes it out of when I hear about it, because I think Jehovah's Witnesses actually have like a considerably more extreme stance on certain things, like the no holidays and like and no birthdays and like and really telling people, like, because Mormons will tell their followers in more subtle ways to not educate themselves. They want everyone to have an education, but there's just anything that goes against the church is designated pretty quickly as like anti-Mormon. That's anti-Mormon literature. If it's just stuff that's just academic analysis of like American history that just sort of disproves certain truth claims that the church makes, they're like, well, don't pay attention to that information. They're very like particular about singling out certain kinds of information they don't want people consuming, certain kinds of books they don't want you reading, certain kinds of music you shouldn't be listening to, certain kinds of movies you shouldn't be watching, things like that. But it's weird because there's this sort of like gaslighting thing that happens where like Mormons are very like talented and like and good at making money, and they've got like they're very like entrepreneurial and stuff. Like Utah County, where BYU is, has all the, it's just like so many startups come out of there, and there's so many people who like really have a knack for getting things off the ground, and they raise their kids and train their kids to be like singers and dancers and performers, and it's a very big thing in Utah to be like musical theater and all this stuff. But then when it comes to actually like pursuing it really and going, I'm going to go into like I went into show business, people are like, oh well, you should, like, show business is bad, like it's full of bad liberal people who, so you should only do it as a hobby. So it's this weird kind of gaslighting thing where like they train you to be this way, but then when you want to go do it, they're like, well, don't actually go do it, go get a job in like something more secure, go be like a lawyer or a doctor or work in finance or something, and then on the side, if you want, you can do community theater as like a hobby, and you can do Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat every few years, something like that.
Wow.
So there's that, you know.
Yeah,
but it's not explicitly stated, it's more subtle. It's more like no one will explicitly state that you shouldn't do this or that. It's more subtle.
It must be liberating to do the content that you do now. I'm sorry, Genevieve, like jumping in.
No, please.
To have the freedom to express yourself when maybe you didn't think you'd have that ability.
Sure. You know, I mean, I haven't been Mormon for 15 years. And so it's been a long time of just like not like really caring. But I definitely remember at the beginning, feel the freedom of being like, oh, I can really explore anything now. I can read anything. I can learn about anything. There is that fear of like learning about things that might be harmful to my faith, you know, learning about things that might be harmful to your testimony, where it never really occurs to people that like, if you're, because Mormons talk about their faith, and I don't know if it's the same with Jehovah's Witnesses, but they talk about their faith like it's this ironclad thing. They use the word I know. It's always, I know this church is true. I know this is the one true gospel of Jesus Christ. I know this is the restored fullness of the gospel that Joseph Smith brought to I know Joseph Smith talked to God and Jesus. I know these things happen. It's so ironclad, but it's also like super flimsy, because any sincere investigation into it and like and really being open to like all the information that's on the table will ruin your testimony, will just like destroy your testimony. And so what was liberating to me was being able to just go, oh, I can really like be open to any philosophy, any school of thought. When I was taught growing up, like, be careful about what you look into, because certain things can damage your relationship with God and damage your testimony. But it's such an interesting thing that it's like, well, if this thing is so ironclad, if I'm so locked in on this thing, why is it so dangerous to expose it to any kind of scrutiny, to any kind of, you know?
Yeah, if it were that ironclad, it should hold up to any sort of criticism.
Yeah,
exactly.
And also, Greg Markowski, thank you so much for your $20 super chat. Hey, it's the GR show this week. CTFD, which stands for Carpe the fucking Diem.
Yes.
Love it.
And so I don't know a whole lot. Honestly, I don't know a whole lot about Mormonism except for Joseph Smith being sort of this crazy con man, the golden tablets. Jesus, I think, came to America, and people inherit planets. There's magic underwear, and the temple rituals that people don't tell you about. Caffeine and alcohol aren't okay, but Diet Coke is fine, even though it's caffeinated. And my guilty pleasure is the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City.
Oh, girl. Yes. Yes.
And,
love it.
And I was just thinking about that because of what you said about, you know, Mormonism sort of like growing this culture of like go-getters and entrepreneurs. And I just think of this one woman on that show who says, we Mormons believe perfection is attainable. So I started a Botox clinic.
Yes.
But I would, you know.
Is that Heather? Did Heather do the Botox clinic?
Yeah, I think Heather, she's like, I think she's the divorced woman who is like kind of a pariah in the community.
Well, and then Lisa's like full-blown Mormon. At least she identifies. She's like, no, I'm Mormon, but she like has a tequila company.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of Mormons like that too, who like they don't live their life like a actual Mormon should, but they're just like, no, I'm Mormon, but like you're like, no, you're not, like, because you don't actually live by any of the things that Mormons are supposed to do. You're just doing it because it's sort of like what you're used to and like how you were raised. But I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, and oh my gosh, I'm so glad that you guys know who I'm talking about, because
But I
I'm
love
not
the
sure how many
show.
people watch Real
great.
Housewives of Salt Lake City.
It's so
really
juicy. It's such a
Oh,
juicy
it's so
show.
good. Oh, the woman who married her grandfather.
Oh my God, Mary Cosby.
Mary is
Dude.
crazy.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's a complete. I think. Well, I shouldn't say. I'm not going to say. But
yeah.
what I think that church is, I will not say.
Oh, Mary Cosby's thing.
Mhm,
Ooh, that's
mhm.
a cult. That's
okay, you said it. Okay,
that's
it's
a
called.
cult. Oh, that's a. I mean, you know, I did a podcast episode on my show like a year ago where I tried to come up with some definers of like what is a cult, because I think a lot of religions qualify as like a cult, like most really. But I was trying to I was talking about Trumpism, and I was like, is Trumpism a cult? Like, what is a cult? Let's try to define what a cult is, and like, does Trumpism, because it's hard to delineate between cult and religion. I had a friend who told me that a definition he heard was that if your organization does a net good, so let's say like some people are really harmed by it, but most of the people who are a part of it are helped by it, and it does a net good, then it's not a cult. And I was like, I don't know. I don't think that jives with me.
How do you know that?
Yeah, I know exactly. I'm like, how could you measure that anyway? But so one of my one of my definers was, if your organization that you're a part of, this thing that's supposed to be for helping people, has ever like wrecked someone's life or has ever like torn a family apart, even a handful of people. If there's people who are like, I did that thing, I was part of that group and I went all in on it and it wrecked me, it like fucked up my mental health, it messed up my family, it tore my family apart. If that's ever happened, you might be in a cult. There were other definers, like obviously a charismatic figurehead at the top, usually a dude. And like, do you have a hierarchical framework? Is there like a series of people who are there to keep each other in check and check in on each other? And is there warning of not looking at information outside of the group, like, and stuff like that? And many religions meet these qualifications of like, don't look at people and information from outside of the group, only listen to people inside of the group. People outside of the group are subversives who are trying to ruin your light. But I really think that definer thing of like, has your group ever destroyed someone's life? Has someone who like really was trying to be a part of it had their life wrecked by it? And so many of these groups, so many religions just have a trail of wreckage of people who are like, it tore my family apart. It wrecked my mental health.
Right. Trauma, PTSD, religious trauma.
Yeah.
If enough people, if a handful of people can check that off, why wouldn't you want to just do a little bit of investigation?
Yeah.
Some reflection.
Yeah,
any business, even if you were running a business and found you had an abusive manager and 5 people got harmed, wouldn't you want to say, let me change managers. Let me go see what's going on in my business.
If you were seeing a therapist that was really working for you and you're like, I really like this therapist, and you found out that like 10 of their ex-clients were like, that person ruined my life. Like that person was like really manipulative and abusive. And you're like, I don't know, it's working for me. Like, I'm like, it's like, I don't know.
Sure?
Yeah. What kind of relationship do you have going on there?
Yeah. Would you even be aware if there was an issue going on?
And your therapist is going, don't listen to that. Don't listen to those people who are saying that I ruined their lives. They're liars and dissidents. And
What was it? Well, I don't know. I mean, this is so long ago, I guess 15 years. Did you immediately start to look into like the church background, or did this take years before you felt comfortable?
No, I pretty much, once that liberating thing of being able to like look at anything, once that was lifted, I just was like, I'm gonna look into anything that I was always told not to look into. And it was amazing how much of the stuff that I was told not to read or not to look into was like very innocuous. It was just literally people just like accurately reporting history. Yeah. They were just sort of like, oh yeah, like there are documents of Joseph Smith being arrested and as a con man and like a con artist. He was a water diviner. Like he like had a career as a water diviner before he founded the Mormon Church and stuff. Like he was a treasure hunter, and he was doing that before he like came up with like he was all kinds of like he always had an angle of how he was gonna like swindle people out of their money, and he was always coming up with some kind of ploy. And they obviously don't teach any of that stuff to Mormon people, but it's stuff that it's just like it's not like the way that Mormons tell they tell their members that it's all lies perpetrated by like angry people who want to take down wicked people, evil people. And then when you go outside of it and just look at it, it's like, no, it's just historians just being like, no, this is what happened. This is why most of us aren't members of your church, is because we're aware of this information that you're not aware of, which is another defining characteristic of a lot of cults and religions, is the most devoted people are the least aware of what their actual organization is like that. And it's by design. They are designed to keep that information from you, to like, they don't want you knowing that stuff. And
even if you do know, a lot of times you're so trained to protect them, you just protect them at all costs. Like that couldn't be true. And if it is true, then it was probably like a one-off. There's always some kind of
cognitive dissonance.
There's always an explanation.
Apologetics. There's always
Yeah.
Get good at that.
Yeah. And I, the way that I've heard cults defined before, or at least the distinction between a cult and a religion is basically time. So if you have a leader who is like actively alive and working, then like, yeah, that's probably a cult. If, go a couple generations and that leader is gone, the figurehead is dead, but the belief is still around, then it's sort of designated as a religion. But I would say that it definitely falls so much more on that isolationism, that idea that everything that we say is right and anything else you hear is wrong, to the point where you shouldn't even interact with people who don't believe the way that we do. I mean, that in and of itself, I mean, I worked in politics in 2020, and it's fucking crazy out there. You see the same things with Mormons and with just Christianity as a whole, where they tell you that all of these counter arguments are really just the devil deceiving you. I mean, well, that's what they see, AP and Reuters, the New York Times, if you're in that Trump cult, where it's just like OAN or Fox News. Yeah.
So basically.
Yeah, there's always an argument.
The control over where the information comes from. And you see that with Trumpism, where it's like they tell you which information sources are safe information sources and which ones are not safe. And people think that this exists on the left too. It's like, it really doesn't. I've never been told like, don't listen to OAN. It's like, just like, look what OAN said. It's demonstrably not true. I'm not told don't listen to them. I'm told like, go ahead and listen, and then like, look into it. It's not true. They're just lying. They're just, you can prove that what they're saying is not correct, that they're lying, they're misreporting facts. Whereas in Trumpism, it's like, these people wouldn't even dare watch CNN, because it would be like, I would be afraid. It's that same thing of like, my testimony is too fragile to expose it to scrutiny, to criticism. It's too fragile. If you expose me to like a clip, for instance, of Donald Trump like explaining how he's going to lie to us and being like, watch, look, he says right here in this interview, this is what I was going to do. I was going to lie to him just like this. And then I did it. And then he did it, and you believed him. They like can't handle that information. So they let the cult tell them where it's safe to get information from and where it's not safe to get information from, because their identity is wrapped up in that belief. And it's really a protection of identity. It's really a protection of like who I am, the way that I view myself is wrapped up in this thing. And if anything happens to take that down, it takes me down with it. Like I won't know what to do. I will be in a sea of chaos without a rudder to direct my ship if you take away this belief. And that's it. It's that way for most people who are in cults. Is the cult become there's this very codependent aspect of like
it's a cult within a cult too.
Yeah.
Because they're probably Christians. And that's how they've gotten into this cult, probably somehow, thinking that God has some I'm pretty sure I've heard the QAnon stuff that this is like God deemed and directed and whatnot. So
God picked Donald Trump to be the leader of the world, like the worst person he could possibly pick. Like yeah.
We literally made a movie about that in the 80s. It was Back to the Future Part 2. He wasn't the good guy.
Yeah.
Didn't work out well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really crazy, but it's so refreshing and amazing to see people who sort of come from these very cultish, crazy backgrounds and sort of come out the other side being incredibly rad, cool, amazing people. I would actually love to hear both of your stories about how, like, you're, a little more in depth about your deconversion.
Oh, sure.
Rion, please.
Oh,
take it away.
Please.
Oh, my deconversion story, like how I came to be deconverted.
Yeah. What was your first, like, hold up moment? Like, this is a little off.
For most people, I say that there was always little moments that kind of started clicking for me, questions that when I was a kid that I wasn't allowed to ask. And now as an adult, I was like, wait a minute, I can ask these questions. And I started to feel a little more safe doing so. But one day, it was right around when COVID started, I was in my makeshift little sewing room, sewing masks for my friends. And my daughter had come downstairs and she said, and he lives with us, this is like something JWs wouldn't do, but like, I'm like, whatever, you're safe here. I'd rather that. So she comes downstairs and says, Mom, we just watched this show on A&E about cults and extreme religions. And they had the JWs in there and they said it's a cult. And we really think that they are a cult. And they had like Scientology in there and all these other religions. And I was like, really? And at that moment, all the times I remember sitting in church and them saying, oh, we're not a cult. We don't drink the Kool-Aid. We don't hold guns to your head. Ha, ha, ha. It's a big old joke. And the word just kind of reverberated in my head over and over for probably like 2 days. And I finally had the strength to look at that show. And I just watched the whole thing from start to finish. And my head was blown off. I was convinced, like, that was all it took. It was like, I knew it, but I was afraid. I was so afraid to die, quite frankly. And I just had the strength, and it was my kids who gave me the strength. And that was really what did it. I started going down that rabbit hole, and, it was kind of a crap time because, here you feel like the world could be ending. It's not. I'm not even afraid of that anymore. But my hands shook for like a year straight almost while I just deep dived into this information. But I came out, I felt like a phoenix, really. I just felt like, whew, I'm here, I'm alive, I have this life. Like, okay, that life isn't promised, but this is what I have. And I'm going to try to fight for the people who are here under that spell. So there's my story.
I love that. I can't even imagine, because I've talked to a lot of people about their deconversion stories, and it usually is sort of like the slow trickle where, it might be a few years or even a few decades of sort of questioning before they sort of like gently roll off the cliff. I can't even imagine like diving into a deep docuseries that sort of just lays it out on the table and slaps you in the face and just kind of going like, oh, there's that. That's yeah.
Because at first you think like, okay, well, is it that bad? Like, is it that harmful? Is it really that bad? And then I started to think like, no, wait a minute. I wasn't allowed to have an education. I wasn't allowed to do anything with my life that I wanted to do. And I started to think, no, wait a minute. You were lied to. This isn't like, okay, they just got some things wrong. Like, no, this is deceitful, intentional, misusing their power. So I was like, no, it's more than that. And that is really what was like, I need to learn more. But I did leave religion for a little bit, but then I had decided to come back because I thought I needed to get my life back together. And this kind of was like, boom, 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 went back, realized things weren't right. Like stuff didn't sound right like it used to sound when I was a kid. And I guess maybe that was the adult in me starting to pick it up. And then when my daughter had said that to me, it was like, oh, okay, wow. Yeah, so it was a long time, but 40 years, oh, long enough.
Yeah. Austin?
Yeah, you know, I mean, a lot of people that I meet in sort of the Mormon space, or like the, you know, XJW space, or it. And I don't think I really thought about this until like the last year. I did this podcast called Mormon Stories, which is a podcast that exists for people kind of transitioning it or asking questions in that faith. And they were so blown away that John, who runs that show, has been doing the show for years now, probably like 7, 8, 9 years.
Yeah,
something
it's
like
been
that.
a long time.
It's been a long time. And he was like, it's so rare that we hear a story from someone who left before their mission, because the mission is sort of designed in Mormon culture to like secure the member more than anything else. It's like they send young men on missions right after high school, and those 2 years are really meant to like cement you as a member. They say it's to go out and convert other people. Really what it is it's like those are the 2 years that like we're trying to make sure we've got you as a lifetime member, because for 2 years, in some of your most formative years, as you're becoming an adult person, we're going to like make you all day, every day immersed in this thing, and like almost set up like a sunk cost situation for you, where you're going to be like so in on this thing. You're going to spend so much time and effort going in on this thing that ever considering leaving it is going to be a very hard proposition. Now, I don't know if I actually believe that the people who are running things actually think about it that nefariously, but I do think that like subconsciously it's sort of set up in that way to secure membership. I somehow got out when I was 18, and that I didn't realize how rare that is. That a lot of people, it takes them until later on in life to even be able to dare to start asking certain questions. I don't know why I was able to. I don't know why I was able to like ask the questions that I asked, but they were asked of me. And it's such an interesting sequence of events. It's like I wanted to go to Brigham Young University, BYU, the Mormon school. I wanted to go study theater there. The reason I wanted to go is I wanted to be able to be an actor, but I didn't want to be at a school that was going to like make me say the F word in plays and things like that. And so
that's
I was
adorable.
Like, yeah, totally. I was like, I want to like go to a school where I could like be an actor, but I won't have to compromise my values. I didn't get in, and I got into a different school that I thought would also be like safe for me. Like the guy that ran the musical theater program was Mormon, and there seemed to be a lot of LDS kids in the program. And so I was like, I'll be all right up here. But it was like away from home. And so it was the first time I'd ever lived away from home. And my plan was to go on a mission after one semester. I was going to go to one semester of college. My birthday's in January. I was going to go on the mission. And in that one semester of being away from home for the first time, being outside of the cult for the first time in my life for a sustained amount of time, I just met some kids that like were asking me questions that I had never really dared to ask myself before. And I was defensive about it. But they were just asking simple questions like, so you're going to go on a mission, huh? And I was like, yeah, totally. And they were like, so you're going to go like sell people on this church? And I'd be like, well, you know, I'm not like selling people. And they're like, aren't you though? Like, aren't you like trying to convince them that like your way of life is probably the best bet for them? And I'd be like, yeah, I guess. And they'd be like, and have you ever done anything else? Like, have you ever like lived any other way before? Like, did you ever? And I was like, no. And they'd just be like, isn't that weird that you're going to be 19 and you're going to be like selling people that like your way of life is the best way, and you've never actually experienced any other way of life? And I was like,
it's a good question.
Those are good friends.
Very good question.
But I was like kind of going like, because I was also like, I want to be a good missionary. I want to be a good salesman. So I literally approached it from the
salesman.
Like, totally. I was like, I want to convert a lot of people. And I was like, it's a good point. If I'm going to be a good salesman about this thing, I should know more about it. And I think the best way to know more about just life in general. And so I literally stepped away and I told my parents, I'm not going on the mission yet. I'm going to take spring semester. going to do that too. I said, I think I'm not going to go to church for a while. And they were like, why? What happened? What happened? I just said, I want to just see what it's like to not go. And I fully expected in my full believer head that I was like, I've been told my whole life that it's impossible to be happy without the gospel, that like you'll be miserable. And so I was like, I kind of want to go into the darkness a little bit. And I fully expected to like fall flat on my face and be miserable. But I was like, I need to see what that's like so that I can tell people on the mission, hey, I went and did all this stuff, and trust me, it's not better than the church. Like, and so it was sort of like this trial stepping away. But once I did that, it was like taking the headset off of a VR simulation. It was like, I like, as an experiment, was like, let me see what happens when I take the headset off. And I bet it's awful. And I took it off and I was like, oh my God, it's the real world.
Yeah.
And I can't go back. Like, I couldn't get back in. Once I was out, it was like, oh, I can't ever go back. Like, no. I can't unknow what I know now. And then it was just a series of being willing to ask more and more questions and investigating things from a whole different lens, not investigating things as a believer, but investigating things as a person outside of the group now, and seeing it like outsiders see it, seeing it with the headset off, with the goggles off, and everything was just 180 different. And it was like, I can't plug back in, it's like unplugging from the Matrix or something. Like, you can't see it.
It's a red pill.
It can't be undone. Also, Anton Gomez, thank you so much for your 20 Mexican dollars peso super chat. And Chad Harris, $5. Thank you so much. Cult Survivor here. Thanks for the awesome way y'all are tackling this subject.
Cult survivors.
I have so many thoughts, Austin, because so I grew up in San Francisco, far removed from any religion whatsoever. Both my parents are atheists. It was never anything that really influenced my life until really it was moving to the Bible Belt, moving to Trump country. And I'm thinking about like a very close friend of mine who is, quite younger than me, and she has I remember I asked her if she would like hang out with me one night, and she said, "Oh, sorry, I've got my college Bible study." But she wasn't in college at the time, so I sort of like asked her like, "Oh, what's that about?" And she said, "Well, there's this horrible thing when kids go to college, like they usually fall away from the faith, and so we're there to sort of support each other, and keep each other accountable." And I wanted to scream like, why is that? Is it because you're getting outside of your small town and like meeting people who have different thoughts and ideas from you, and like learning about things from different perspectives? Like, how crazy
Why is that bad?
Yeah.
It's so interesting, the turnaround that happened. My freshman fall semester, I had a roommate from New Jersey who was asking me questions about my faith and stuff like that. I gave that guy a Book of Mormon on the last day that we lived together at the end of fall semester. And I wrote inside of it, because he asked me the question. He said, he was also like, how do you know that you're doing the right thing if you've never done anything else? And I wrote inside of that book, I said, everything I'll ever need to know is inside of this book. Let me say a few things about that. I'd never actually read the book. I'd read parts of it my whole life growing up, but I'd never actually sat down and read it cover to cover. So I was just like saying some kind of meaningless platitude that felt really like inspirational. And I was like, everything I've ever needed to know is inside of this book. I'm saying this as like literally a kid who knows fucking nothing, who hasn't even read the book that I'm giving to this guy. I'm so embarrassed about this 15 years later in my life that this happened. But it's also like, it really shows like these kids that are like, we're there to help each other. They just don't know anything other than what they know and what they've been told they know. And so they really don't know anything.
Yeah, that's not uncommon, unfortunately. I've got a friend who's, pretty active on TikTok, and I remember he was doing this debate with like a young TikTok apologist, not David Ladding, but also like a sort of like emphatically crying really close to the camera about Jesus. Yeah, he's on another level.
He's
but
wild.
It's too much. It's
it's
gross.
it's sort of scary. Like, I want to talk about what being deep in a cult does to your mental health, but first I just gotta say, like, I remember, my buddy was doing this debate with one of those young TikTok Christians about whether or not the Bible condones slavery or not, and I want to say, like, 45 minutes to an hour into this debate, the kid says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not that familiar with the Old Testament," which is like most of the book.
Yeah.
For one thing.
Yeah, that's what it's all based
half
on.
of it.
Yeah.
It's at least half of it.
More than.
Yeah. I mean, just going by pages, you've got the Bible, and this much is the Old Testament. You've got like this little sliver that's like, no, this is the important stuff. It's all the Word of God, but we don't need to know, all of it. But
the amount of times that I've walked through the circle with Christians, like the amount of times I've had this exact conversation with a Christian person where I went, why is being gay bad? And they go, because it's in the Bible. And I go, where is it in the Bible? Do you know where it is? Sometimes they don't know. I don't know. And I go, all right, we're not off to a great start. But sometimes they do. And they go, it's in Leviticus. And I go, okay, cool, it's in Leviticus. So there's all these other things in Leviticus, like you can't eat shellfish and you can't do this and you can't do that. Why do we not do that stuff? And they go, well, and sometimes they know this and sometimes they don't. But like in the options that they know it, they go, well, because when Jesus came down and he had a sacrifice, he fulfilled Levitican law. And so we don't have to do things in Levitican law anymore. I go, oh my God, I'm so happy you know that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. So if this
Therefore,
one place in the Bible is the only place that it says it's bad to be gay, even though we won't even get into how that was a mistranslation and how that was intentionally put in to the King James version as a mistranslation because of like
projection, because King James was flaming.
Right. We won't get into that. But like, if it's only in this one place and all the other things from this one place were fulfilled by Jesus coming, how come Jesus' sacrifice didn't fulfill that one thing? And without fail, every time I've had that conversation, and it's been many, many times I've had that exact conversation, that's the moment where people get defensive and mad. They go, I feel like you're attacking me. And I'm like, no, you were with me this whole way. You followed the thread. And now that it's at a point where you can't proceed without acknowledging, you've poked a major hole in this thing that I'm hanging on to that makes me kind of a bigoted person. Like, they can't proceed and they get upset. But up until that point, they're like with me, they're answering the questions, they're following along. And then when I go, so therefore, it's like, okay, I don't like this. You're being rude. And I'm like, you were with me. Yeah.
I've noticed that the most angry attacks come when you just directly use their words against them, because it's just embarrassing. Yeah. I was actually just on Talk Heathen yesterday. We had a really fun caller. If you guys want to go listen to that after you watch this show, Billy, it was incredible. We strawmanned everything by just repeating exactly what he said verbatim. But speaking of callers, we do have a call from Chad in Alabama. He's an atheist and a cult survivor. He is interested in talking to Mormon missionaries to try and plant the seed to get them out, looking for advice. Austin, I think you were going to take this one away. Let's get you there. Hey, Chad, you on the line?
Hey, I'm here. How's it going?
Good. How are you doing, man?
Awesome so far.
So you are trying to anti-missionary the missionaries. Is that what I'm understanding?
Well, it's a bit of an oversimplification. Like, it's more along the lines of, I myself grew up in a very high controlling, very culty environment, and I myself did the whole door-to-door thing. I was an independent fundamental Baptist, but much worse. It's like a subsection of that. And so I'm familiar with, like, the tactics and, what they use, even though Mormons, I know, have a very specific set of arguments and goals and everything. I myself am an atheist, have been for close to a decade now. But I was recently contacted randomly by some Mormon missionaries in my area who, were doing the whole, hey, we just want to talk to you and tell you how Christ can really make your life better. And of course, I already know, they're not going to get anywhere with me on that front. But I'm also sympathetic to the fact that, like Austin said, they're being put in this situation where they're far from home. It's, it's 2 years of doing absolutely miserable work where you're probably dealing with like terrible people who are, yelling at you and, shutting the doors and stuff. Yeah. And that also helps to solidify, that whole persecution sense, which keeps you in. So I was thinking, since, I have the time and I have the wherewithal to, deal with this sort of thing, I was just wondering, I'm not necessarily looking to deconvert anyone, but I do want to at least share my time, or at least show them a different side of what heathens look like other than what they've been told. Because one thing that helped me get out was when I interacted with other people who didn't believe like me, and they didn't behave in the ways I was told they would. So I was just wondering if Austin had maybe any insight as to how to interact with folks, to maybe, these guys in particular, to maybe, show them, hey, what you've been taught about, atheists and people who don't believe is not necessarily true. And maybe that can kind of give them something to think about for their own journey later on.
I live in Los Angeles, and I used to live in New York, which is where I am now. I'm just visiting. And every time I see Mormon missionaries out and about, I go up and say hi, and I ask them where they're from, and I let them know like that I'm from Utah. Usually they're from Utah. A lot of times they'll be like, I'm from Salt Lake City. I'm like, me too, my dude. I'm like, well, it's like we talk about Salt Lake, we talk about home, and it's so interesting what happens. They'll say stuff like, they'll go like, so are you in a ward here? Like, do you have a ward? And I'll go, oh, no, I'm not LDS. And they'll go like, oh, well, like, were you ever LDS? And I go, yeah, I was raised LDS. And there's like a hush that happens because they know exactly what that means. That's all I have to say is I was, and I am no longer. And they know this is not a safe person to talk to, because this person knows everything that we could possibly tell him. Anything we could possibly say, he's heard it. He knows. And he has chosen for some reason to no longer be associated with it. But it gets really quickly, they're like, oh, okay. And they don't push it. They don't go, why is that? Or they don't ask follow-up questions. It stops right there. And I don't push it either, because I have no interest in getting into that kind of conversation. But what I'm saying here is, Chad, that I think what you can expect is resistance for sure, even if you're being very friendly. The second that it feels like you're pressing them or trying to get them to think in a certain way, even the usage of companionship, having them go 2 by 2, is very intentional because it keeps them accountable to each other. Mm-hmm. So even if one of them liked what you had to say or was interested in what you had to say, he can't really show that in front of his companion because his companion can't know that he's like, so he might, but you also might find yourself some young men who are like me, where like they fancy themselves a smarty pants, which I definitely did. I thought I knew everything about Mormonism, and I was going to be like Elder Price from the Book of Mormon musical. Like I was going to be the best missionary that there ever was, and I was going to like blow people's socks off with how much I knew. Which
Super
is so funny.
Mormon.
Yeah, and I knew so little about the Mormon Church actually, which is so funny. But I really thought of myself as being like a really learned, smart, well-spoken kid, and I was ready to go toe-to-toe with people when they had questions, which is what fucked me up in the first place. Is like I wanted to like debate these people in my freshman year of college, and I didn't actually have any good answers for them. So I think you might find yourself with a few of those kids who are like ready to go, who are really hyped up. Their mission presidents and the people that they're working with have been telling them like, you've got the Spirit of God. Like if you open your mouth and speak, God will tell you what to say. They're really hyped up and they're really ready for that conversation. So I think with the right like spirit of friendliness and respect, you could just simply ask some questions that you know they don't have the answer to, and just leave it at that. They might not be able to, they'll probably maybe try to find a way to work around it or something. But I think that's like the best place to start is figure out some questions you can ask a Mormon person that you know. And you can even do the one that I talked about, like Levitican law. Like why did Christ's sacrifice not fulfill Levitican law? Mormons believe in Levitican law, and they believe in Jesus fulfilling Levitican law with his sacrifice. Why is being gay still bad if it's nowhere in the Book of Mormon, and if the only place that it is in the Old Testament? Like questions like that you know they don't have the answer to, but finding a way to ask it that's not in a super challenging tone or argumentative, but almost more curious. Like I've always wondered about this. Do you guys know about this? Like why, curious questions about Joseph Smith. Like, is there a reason why Emma Smith is always like named as the wife of Joseph Smith when she was the 29th woman he married? Is there a reason why? But finding a way to ask the question that doesn't feel, but you're like, sincerely, like, I read about this. Like, is there a reason why you guys don't talk about the other 28 wives, or like questions that they don't have the answer to? They might not be able to answer you in the moment, or they might get defensive. But I think what you're trying to do is plant seeds in curious, maybe overconfident young minds that as long as they can go home and go, boy, I really didn't have an answer for that guy. And I was told that if I just opened my mouth, God would tell me what to say, and I really didn't have an answer. That's something that can really plant a seed that can start forming some cracks for people.
And
questions are good.
Yeah, I relate to that because, like you said, I too was like the smarty pants kid when I went door to door and stuff, and I was always itching for a debate. And looking back on it, it was just so cringe. And those times where people did ask those questions, were the things that stuck with me later. So that's actually really solid. It's been a while since I've read through the Book of Mormon, at least the parts that I could stay awake through. I did read the CES letter, which was infinitely more interesting. But so I might go back and look over some of that, just kind of refresh my memory.
Yeah, and so Chad, I don't know if you're familiar with street epistemology. Are you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was.
Oh yes, I've seen some of that.
Yeah. So Anthony Magnabosco, who was actually our first ever guest on the show when we launched it last year, he has these really great videos where he is practicing street epistemology with these Mormon missionaries that are at UT San Antonio. And I want to say there's actually 3 or 4 conversations that he had with them. And one of those Mormons is now a host of podcasts with the atheist community of Austin. Objectively Dan, awesome guy. I think that ultimately it comes down to being respectful and being just genuinely invested in understanding the person across from you, and just not being a dick, because a lot of people, regardless of their religion, they're told that people who don't believe the way they do are these lost, evil, mean, satanic whatevers. So just be a cool dude, and be nice, and I think that'll get you pretty far. And definitely check
I'm hoping that's the case, and that's really solid. So go ahead.
No, I was just saying again, definitely check out those videos because they're very great. Somebody I see.
Yeah, I'll definitely do that.
Sorry, Secular Rarity said Anthony Magna Bosco.
Bosco.
Fire emoji. Yeah, I second that. But yeah, that's I think you will be just fine. I love the ideas that Austin had for questions. Especially, ask about those wives. Have them get into that tea.
Ask them about like how do you build a transoceanic vessel in the Bronze Age? Like, how do you sail across the sea from Jerusalem to America with one family building a boat big enough to do that, and to hold all the livestock that they needed to eat on the way? You need an entire, I mean, I don't know if they'd be ready for that one. That's a little advanced, but the idea that it's they don't believe that God just gave a boat to Nephi and Lehi and his family. They believe that they built that thing and that they filled it with enough food to sail from Jerusalem to America in the Bronze Age. And it was one family that did this. It would have taken an entire city and industry to do that. It was so.
Hell, we got cruise ships that can't do that.
Right. Yeah. And at that time in the Bronze Age, no one was doing that. And apparently this family did it. And usually the answer will be well, God made it possible. But it's well, if God made it possible, why didn't God just give them a boat? Why didn't they just wake up one day and there was just a boat there, a magic boat that they took? Why'd they have to build it? And they built it in the desert. They needed trees, and they needed sheep for the wool so they could make the sails, and they needed,
Oh, Lord.
Yeah.
That's great.
Some of that doctrine stuff.
I'm writing all this down 100 miles an hour, so I got you.
Perfect. Yeah, and this is recorded. You can always come back and re-listen to this conversation too. So yeah, Chad, thank you so much for calling. Those are great questions. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Have a good one. Man, yeah, it's so interesting seeing the different ways that people will interact with missionaries of any kind, because I mean, I get JWs knocking on our door all the time. We don't have a huge Mormon population here in Maryland, but we do have an incredibly gaudy church about 40 miles away from here, a temple that I get to drive by quite frequently. But yeah, it's interesting the difference between people who will sort of just like slam a door in their face versus other people who will actually try to engage. And I also have some super chats to catch up on. So pull the weeds, keep the flowers. Thank you so much for your $5. My mother put me in a cult as a teenager. I left at 22 years old, completely broken. It's not something I share about. Most don't understand. I will say that's why we're here, because there's a lot of people who understand, and you're definitely not alone. And thank you too, Toy Ranch, $20. You're awesome. Love these guys. Yeah. Gosh. So
was there any? Can I ask Oscar about? Was there anything about the doctrine when you left that you really thought about and said, or was that maybe one of them? The ships sailing across under the sea. Was there something you thought like, how did I really believe that could be possible?
Well,
my goodness.
You touched on it in your story, that it's sort of like a thing you always knew, but you weren't willing to look at. There is that element of like, once you just decide to accept it, it's kind of like knowing that like a relationship you're in isn't right. And you don't want to do the work of breaking up, which is hard. And, and starting from scratch, it feels like you're already in something and you've got this person there that you're with, and I guess it's comfortable, even if there's a part of you that knows that it's not working on some level, but you're like, we can always work on it. We can always, but the coming to terms with like, I actually have to do something about this, and I have to be willing to like go out on a limb and be by myself for a while, is very hard and scary. But it's also usually happens because you've sort of known it in the back of your head for a long time. And that's sort of what it was like. There was a part of me that was like, I kind of always knew it was a problem that people were telling me not to read certain things and not to look at certain things. I kind of always knew that it was like not great. And I always kind of knew that the way that we told the stories about Joseph Smith, it was too sparkly. It was too clean. It was too, and there were just these things where you're like, I think I always kind of knew that like these stories that are told, that mythologizing of these people is a little blown out of proportion, and that it's doesn't quite ring true, but it's a nice story. But I don't know. I mean, like that transoceanic vessel thing, I didn't think about that till like 10 years later, because my brother was the host of a podcast called Mormon Expression, which was another ex-Mormon thing. And the guy that started that podcast did a whole episode about like what it would take to build a transoceanic vessel in the Bronze Age. And it was like one of the best episodes of a podcast I've ever heard. And he and like these other like engineering experts like broke down exactly what you would need to build a boat that could sail from Jerusalem to America. And it was like crazy, the amount of the stuff that you would need.
Yeah. So. Even Noah's Ark, someone in the Bible Burners said that Noah's story was the catalyst for their deconversion. That story does not make sense at all.
None of the stories in the Bible make sense.
No, well, no, definitely not now. Looking back, they certainly don't. But I guess I don't know, you're told that they're plausible, and once a kid, you just stay in that kind of kid realm of not really making those adult decisions of, okay, would this be possible if I wanted to do it? And I know that thinking kind of like childlike affected my adult decision making, because I was never really prepared. I feel like I saw the world like childlike. I was in it, but I wasn't a part of it. And I don't know. I think it skewed a lot of things. And when I stepped outside, I realized how strange an experience it was. And I wasn't willing to accept it until I really left. that, oh, it was a different experience. It's not normal to think like that and live like that. Not be able to make adult decisions, critically think.
I mean, people have been doing this as long as we can look back. Like, people have been trying to come up with stories. And the interesting thing is, I mean, I just saw a musical here in New York called Hadestown that's based on the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice. It's like Greek mythology. And I've never really related to Greek mythology. Like, I always find like this, I never get what the point of the stories are. It's sort of like stories from the Old Testament where like they tell you a story of like, this God did this and told this person, you're banished from this place for doing this. And then this person turned into a snake because they said this magic word. And then the snake now had the ability to like make you poop your pants when it looked at you. I don't know. And I was always like, I don't get what the point of these stories are. Like, I don't get what, like, they're just so weird, and the gods are so weird, and they're so like petty, and what I think I've realized is like people have been coming up with stories to just sort of explain the experience of being conscious and like being like alive, that weird shit happens and it's hard to make sense of, and someone you love gets sick for no seeming, they were fine one day and then they were sick the next day and they die, and you don't know how to like rationalize, make sense of it. And we've been telling stories about gods that are very human, that are like petty and self-obsessed and narcissistic. And so what always confused me as a kid is like all these God stories had gods that were like, that didn't behave like a omnipotent, all-knowing being would in my head. They behaved, and the Bible's full of it. Abraham and Isaac, it's like this weird thing of like, let's see if you really love me. Would you kill your kid? And then being like, just kidding, don't do it. And it's like, what the fuck are you doing? Don't tell.
It's like a toxic high school relationship.
Don't tell this guy to kill his son and then be
what
like,
are you
just
willing
kidding.
to do for me?
Yeah. It's the same thing with Job.
Yeah.
Yeah. Will you suffer for me? How long
God
will
is
you suffer for me?
God is the villain of the Bible,
of
the Old Testament, and Satan is always the one who's doing the more rational thing. Like always
smart one.
Yeah.
Like, he's the light bringer.
Yeah, it's so bizarre that it's like the fall had to happen for human life to occur. So Satan was actually the one being like, no, you have to eat this thing if life is going to exist. Like it's necessary for the story to unfold the way that it needs to unfold. And God was like, don't do it. And Satan was like, well, no, do it. Like, and then they did it. And like the whole thing happens because they listened to Satan. And God was like, no, just stay in this garden. Just the two of you. Just forever.
Forever.
Just chill here.
Just chill here.
Yeah.
Like,
fine.
what?
I know you have no knowledge of good and evil yet, but you should already know that it is good to listen to what I say and evil to not.
Right.
Right.
It's so
babies,
bizarre.
Adult babies making decisions.
Yeah.
We always have this version of God in our stories that behaves like a really weird, petulant, and it's the same all the way back to Greek mythology. And it's always been like the way that I was told the nature of God, that I was taught in church and in Sunday school, was like this benevolent, all-loving entity that just like was incapable of hate, was incapable of malice, was just this being knew me inside and out and loved me. But then I'd read stories about God and I'd be like, this is incongruous. It's before I knew what cognitive dissonance was. So you just sort of make up a rationalization for those stories. Like, I don't know, the Lord works in mysterious ways that I don't understand.
It's beyond our understanding.
Yeah. I mean, it really does seem like the God of the Bible is sort of just the textbook abusive narcissist.
Yep.
It's really scary.
Megalomaniac.
And before I forget, Anton, thank you so much for your second super chat. Yes, objectively, Dan was snatched by Anthony. You should go watch a video of him as a Mormon missionary. It's beautiful. I love it. The God of the Bible is incredibly problematic when I hear Christians sort of rationalizing hell to me. You know, it's that classic like, why are you making me do this to you? Like blaming the victim of
why are you making me do this?
Yes, exactly.
God has the power to save me from hell. God should have the power to not have people burning for eternity in a torture pit. But God's like, but I have to. If you get the answer wrong just a little bit, I have to.
Yeah.
But why would you create hell first? Why would you create hell before you even create mankind?
Why is any kind of suffering necessary? What is it? What is the point? What is the? There's always this like rationalization of suffering and of pain and
like the need for no.
Yeah,
there isn't a need. If an ultimate God is in control, omniscient, then there'd be no need for the pain. But
have you ever thought of this one, that it doesn't make any sense, that like the idea of Satan or like Lucifer or like an evil god, like an anti-god, doesn't make any sense, because and they always talk about like, well, like the world is the dominion of Satan, and but it's like, is Satan more powerful than God? Does Satan have more power than God? Because Satan seems to be winning, seems to be like running the show down here and winning. It's a very, very small minority of people who seem to be like getting it. And what's weird about that is, if God is all powerful and can do anything, to allow Satan to have pretty much as much power and ability as he does, and to run Earth, it's like, and also, if the plan of God is that like you need to choose God over Satan, that's the test of life, is you need to choose God, then Satan is an integral part of the plan, is an essential part of the plan. Like he needs to exist in order for there to be a choice. And that means that they are working together on this plan. That means that like they're in cahoots, because all Satan would have to do is go, oh, I'm not participating in the plan. Like, I won't do that. Like, I don't like your idea. I don't like your whole test that you're putting people through. I'm not doing it. Like, I'm tapping out. But like, and that's all he would have to do. And surely a being as powerful as Satan would be able to realize that, would be able to go, oh, all I have to do to make this whole plan fall apart is just bounce. But the fact that Satan is participating means either God is like forcing Satan's participation and making Satan participate, which means God is Satan, which means God is the puppet master, or they're working together. It doesn't work out. Like, it doesn't compute. So
when you think of it, when you start to try to break it down logically, that's like the type of answers that you end up with. But when you're inside of it, you just don't see it. No, God needs time. He needs people to prove. He needs this certain, because that's what the JW, he needed this certain amount of time for people to prove, because because of that ultimate sin, the original sin. Now we have to work towards the opportunity to be saved from Satan. The hell? What's the heck?
Yeah.
I gotta wait 2,000 years for what?
You ever heard, I mean, you people go, well, what would be the point of a test? If a teacher gave you all the answers to the test, then you wouldn't learn anything. And they talk about life as like an allegory, like a parable, where they go, no, you're here, it's a test, but the teacher can't just give you all the answers. You wouldn't learn anything. And I always say that's an incomplete analogy. It's not even an accurate analogy. The accurate analogy is you wake up one day in a classroom, or a room of some sort with other people. Somebody stands up and goes, hey, you're in a classroom. The teacher's not here, but I've been appointed as the teacher to teach you what you need to know. And just listen to me, and you should be okay, and you should pass the test. Somebody else stands up and goes, this guy's a liar. I'm the actual appointee of the teacher. The teacher told me what to do. You should listen to me. Somebody stands up and goes, I don't think there is a teacher. I think both these guys are full of shit. And I think that we're just here and we can do whatever we want. Somebody else comes in from a side door and goes like, they're all lying. It's actually that the teacher is inside you, and you just need to listen to the voice inside of your head. And you're like, okay, now we got chaos. Now we just have a bunch of people.
And there's 4,000 different speakers that you can go to.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody insists that they're right and everybody else is wrong. It really is just crazy. Yeah, I know, like I said, I wasn't raised with any religion, but, my mom was. She was raised Catholic, and she, unlike you, Austin, loved Greek mythology, like ate that shit up all the time. And so with Sunday school. It was like, oh, this is awesome. I get to read more just like this mythology. And I think it was when she was like 15 or 16, she understood that the adults in the room actually believed everything that they were saying. And she just sort of said, oh no, no, no. Really?
Oh, no,
really?
no.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. My parents they're in it. They're in it to win it. It is 100% true, 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 true. And I just wish I could tell them all the stuff that I've learned. Like, they don't even get how cool the Bible could actually be if you saw it for what it was versus for what, the higher ups in the religion tell them it is. They just
Did you see Darren Aronofsky's movie Noah?
No.
So it's actually a really interesting film. I remember when it was coming out, I was like, why is Darren Aronofsky making a movie about Noah's Ark? Like, what? Like, what a weird pairing. And then when I saw it, I was like, oh, he made a secular retelling of the flood myth. Like, it's not like, but he's also looking at it going like, if I were just a person who wasn't attached to any religious ideology and I just read this story in this book, it seems to be full of like wizards and magic and people divining sort of like an ancient like natural magic. So the prophets in the movie are like wizards. Like there's like Methuselah who like has this like staff and he like does magic with like, and then there's like these rock monsters that are fallen angels that fell out of the sky and they help Noah build the ark. And they're like these big, so it's almost like watching like Lord of the Rings or something. Like it's like a fantasy movie. And
I might actually have to watch that.
And it's very interesting to see it told that way. Cause you're like, well, this is what it is. But religious people got furious when the movie came out. Cause they were like, this is an insult. You're insulting our faith here. But it was like, no, he's actually telling the story as it's relayed in the book. He's just not using specific language to like acknowledge like Jesus, or he's just sort of telling it as a secular retelling of the story and sort of updating it and adapting it and taking creative license as one would if they were adapting an old, folk myth, and it's a really interesting experiment, just like from a storytelling perspective. And when he was interviewed about it, because people were like, why'd you make this movie? And he goes, well, it's just one of the oldest myths we have. He's like, it didn't originate with the Bible. It's an old myth. The flood myth is an old myth. And he goes, so I just thought, we're always adapting and redoing these old stories. I just thought, let's do a new one. And it doesn't really have anything to do with like upholding Christian ideology in any way. It's just a retelling of a famous human myth.
I'd love to see Gilgamesh retold.
Yeah.
Like, why is that not being done? Gilgamesh, he has a gay lover. He's a strong dude. He's a ruler. I mean, I think he gets babes too. So I mean, he's like got it all going for him. And plus you got the flood story. I'm not sure why somebody hasn't picked this up yet.
Yeah.
I do like to imagine that, in the contemporary times of the Noah story initially being told, that there were also some protesters who were saying like, how could you retell this story from the epic of Gilgamesh and Utnapishtim in such a disrespectful way? How dare you? And they're just like, well, I'm just putting a new spin on it.
Yeah, the Sumerians are like, well, okay, Zuasudra, okay, yeah. I know all about that story.
Or the people were so uneducated that they didn't even know that it was borrowed, which is something that happened in Mormonism, where like most people, Mormons today, don't know that their temple rituals are borrowed from Freemasons. Like they don't know that like Joseph Smith was he just was like, oh, I'm just going to do the exact ritual from Freemasonry. And most people they have no idea that it was just borrowed and adapted.
Yeah. Even the JWs have like Freemasonry connections. All of these cults do, I believe, go back to like the Millerites, and they all have connections back then.
Well, so something that I do, I do remember learning about Mormonism when I was learning about, U.S. history, was that it was sort of born of this time of utopianism in America, where you were having these various different cults and religions sort of popping up to sort of create this utopian society because we've industrialized, and now we're sort of focusing on, oh, maybe child welfare should be a thing. Maybe we should like make a perfect society. And from what I understand, they did sort of start, closer to the Northeast, but the Mormons would kind of get, beat up and have to leave town, and then happen again, they'd have to leave town again and again, and so on and so forth, and then they come upon this beautiful lake of disgusting water that you can't drink, and they said, hey, nobody's gonna come fuck with us here, this is perfect. And that is the story of Mormons settling in Utah around the Salt Lake.
What a story.
I'm sure that's somewhat sensationalized. But...
Hey Ryan, can you tell me about, and I don't know if this is accurate, this is something I heard years ago and I don't know if this is correct, but can you tell me about like the amount of people that JWs believe are going to be saved?
What, are you talking about the 144,000 that go to heaven?
I am talking about that. Yeah. Can you tell me about like, how that works?
Yes, so they took a scripture, I believe is it Revelation? Oh shoot, now it's anyway, but they took a scripture that has a number of 144,000 that are chosen by God to supposedly help him rule in heaven with Jesus Christ over his earthly inhabitants, his new leadership. And so Jehovah's Witnesses don't believe that they excuse me, go to heaven. I'm not that we anymore, that they go to heaven, but they believe the earth will turn into a paradise again, the original status, like the garden. So the general population will live on this paradise and start to turn it back into what it once was, get it back to how it used to be before humans made it bad. But the 144,000 go to heaven, and they are the ones who get to live in heaven for all eternity. And they just kind of rule over the earth and make sure like everything's going according to God's plan at his right hand. Yeah.
Boy, I mean, it's like
one scripture.
Did you ever have the thought growing up in the church, or did anyone ever ask the question, like, did it ever occur? Did you ever think like, man, that is an astronomically small number. That is a because it sounds big, 144,000. I could be one of those people potentially,
right?
But actually, like, no, there's like a 0.0000000000000 continuing 1% chance that of the trillions of people that have existed, you will be one of the 144,000.
Right. Well, but those 144,000 are only within God's organization. So they say that Jesus came back at 1914, because they've done the math since Babylon the Great fell, which actually they think Babylon the Great fell in 607, but it didn't. So their math is even wrong. But so according to their math in 1914, Jesus came back. And when Jesus came back, he saw that Jehovah's Witnesses were the organization. So that's when he chose them. And that's when he gave them the ability to anoint the 144,000. But supposedly back in the day, the 144,000 would have already passed away. Like we went past the years, like it should have happened in 1923 or something. And then they said 75, and then how that goes. Sorry, but
tale as old as time.
And it will continue to. That goalpost will continue to just.
Yeah. They recently just changed it again. So yes, the goalpost did move again,
and it will.
And it will continue.
Yeah. That's wild that they think that Jesus came back in 1914. Mormons know a lot better. Jesus came back in 1830.
Oh, shit.
I mean, like, come on. Like,
Doug, get with it,
walking around in 1900s. He was here in 1830. Back in ancient times,
Yeah, we're late to the game. The J-Dubs, they were so late.
Yeah.
Should have known better.
Back before the Civil War. All right. This is
but you know what you said makes so much sense, because a friend and I were talking about the JW numbers, and we believe they're inflating their numbers. They say they have 8 million members. But if you believe that from 1914 those numbers started to be chosen, the 144,000, that would have already been chosen. Like, God's choosing a couple every
one person
years.
every 15 years. It's
Oh,
like,
come on now. Yeah.
And-
God needs this much time to get his right hand people down, I guess.
and of all the people that are like really devoting themselves to it, that are really putting their whole heart into it, most of them, it's just like, sorry, not enough. Not enough. You're just not special enough, you know?
And the
We
ones
still
who
have
are
it.
chosen, who think that they're chosen, they are the only ones who are allowed to partake of the memorial, which just happened or is happening. Yeah, they have a memorial where they pass the wine and the Christ's body and his blood, and only the anointed are the ones who are allowed to partake of it. So you know how like
So there are
Catholics
people
have the
that are
wafer.
alive who are considered to be the anointed.
Yes, they are. This is what
Do they
boggles my
just not
mind. They
keep
still
count?
believe they're just always going to use this number as some. I don't know how. I don't understand.
We were
I don't get it.
told, every generation is told that we're like the chosen generation because we're the generation that's going to usher in the millennium and bring back the second coming of Christ. Like when, even, it's so funny, they call it the second coming, even though in Mormon theology, Christ not only came to America after he died in Jerusalem, came to America, came back to America in 1832 with Joseph Smith. So it's like, wait, wouldn't it be like the fourth coming? Because you guys are talking about how he has been here, but this is in physical form, in a physical body, returning to earth to like reign over the earth. I was told that I was part of the chosen generation that was going to usher that in. And apparently so was my father's and mother's generation was also told that, and my nieces and nephews are also told that. And so it's just another one of those goalpost moving things of like, we'll just keep telling people that until it happens, which it never will. And
and they keep bringing in like new top members because they start to get old and they're dying, but they just keep bringing new guys up to, well, now these are the real appointed one. These are the ones God has really helped guiding the organization. No. Same recycled stuff.
Yeah, I do love how just sort of in the political climate that we have now, we have these right-wing Christian nationalists who act as if America is in the Bible, as if God is like directly invested in the future of our nation in particular and not any of the other 270. And I do love the fact that you know, the Mormons are there like, what are you talking about? Of course America is in the Bible. You haven't read it yet?
Duh.
Yeah. But
I don't get it. What else? How did you feel about, I don't know if something clicked with you, but when you were told about, well, I'm guessing you were told about the curse of Ham or the curse of Cain, or I don't know what the Mormons call it.
Oh, sure. Just like dark skin and stuff.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't really know about any of that growing up. Like I didn't, there's all this stuff that is conveniently just like not really talked about. Like we don't really
sweep it under the rug.
Yeah. And if we do talk about it, like Mormons generally consider that to be like a mistake, but they don't say it was a mistake. They just say it was something that changed due to continuing revelation. But like in general, if you ask a Mormon person like about that threat, yeah, they've admitted that was like, that was a mistake, but it's like, but shouldn't that have not happened because you guys are claiming to have a direct pipeline to God? But it's also in the book is the problem. It's in the Book of Mormon that when Nephi's siblings were being wicked and evil, their skin turned dark. And so Nephi and all the other white people were killed off by the evil clans. And that's why indigenous people to America, Native American people have dark skin, as they are descendants of the Lamanites whose skin turned dark because they were evil. And so, yeah, just the most racist thing. And and it's something that they don't really talk about, but it's in the book. So like you read it in the book and no one really mentions it. Like you just sort of go over it that like their skin turned dark because they were bad. And you just sort of were like, oh yeah, it makes sense that they were bad. And then their countenance changed and they became like as a kid, you're just sort of like, oh, sure. Like, but you don't understand what that's subliminally placing in your head. That like light skin is good, dark skin is bad. And no one really breaks it down in that concrete of terms for you, but it's in there. And it's just insanely racist and is the basis for a lot of racist policy that continued in the church till 1978. Took them till 1978 to be like, oh yeah, we should
address it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I mean, even, Bob Jones University didn't allow interracial dating on their campus until I want to say it was 2001, 2001, early aughts.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, it's not just a Mormon problem, even though it is very explicitly in the book in a really fucked up way.
There's still no people of color in the Mormon leadership. Like, there's like none.
Yeah.
There's no like, it's all men, and there's no, I mean, so.
The equality is just not, it's not happening.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we do have a sharp cutoff time at 8:30 Eastern. So we're coming up on the end of this episode, which bums me out because I could talk for so much longer. Austin, we didn't even talk about all of the incredible things that you're doing and the content that you're making. I deliberately wore my turtleneck and blazer, and I am feeling on point like a laser.
I just
I will
noticed
have
that.
you know.
Wow. I can't believe I didn't notice it sooner. I should have been like, I respect the TNB. I just thought you were just trying to show up looking great, which is like always a good move.
In the TNB, you gotta look good in the TV.
Yeah. Yeah. You gotta, always dress for the job that you want. No,
and you want to be Austin Archer on TikTok.
Oh, I would never want to be you. I get exhausted making like a TikTok a week, if that. I am so grateful for your service. I know how much work goes into the stuff that you do. It really is incredible.
I know, it's incredible.
And I think that we're probably just gonna have to have you on again just so we can talk about all of that cool stuff, because
anytime we can talk about spirituality versus like what it's like to have a spiritual relationship in a secular mindset and all that stuff, and coming back into a relationship with like prayer and meditation after like years of atheism and things like that. And
I know we touched on that a little bit. I want to say that was last week, and I really wanted to talk about that, but time cut short. Until you are back next, where can people find you?
Your pal _Austin, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Austin Archer on YouTube. You can listen to my podcast. It's called People Pleaser with Austin Archer. It's most places that podcasts are available. Talk about all kinds of things on that show. And austin-archer.com, austinarchermusic.bandcamp.com, Austin Archer on Spotify or Apple Music for my music, all over the place.
I forgot to even mention when introducing you that you're an incredibly talented musician, and everybody can go to Bandcamp and buy your albums, which they should do.
Do it.
Yeah.
God demands it.
We'll do our part 2. And Rion, you are also completely brilliant on TikTok.
Oh, thank you.
I admire both of you guys while I'm scrolling and putting no effort into my content creation. So thank you both for your service to my procrastination.
Thank you.
And where can people find you?
So on TikTok, I am tax.the.churches. And on YouTube, I am Cultastic. And there you go. Oh, and Tax the Churches on Twitter too.
Yeah, I gotta get on the Twitter, but
get on the Twitter. Come Twitter
I know. I'm already so bad at social media, but that's okay.
You'll get better.
We'll
be there for you.
Thank you. I appreciate your support in these difficult times of me engaging too much in.
Hey, I'm Dave tonight, so if you need me as a pinch hitter, Dave, I will be your Dave. You just let me know.
Thank you, Rion.
Just text me.
This is why I love you. But anyways, we're out of time. So I guess that is our show. I hope everybody who watched had a great time. I love talking to you guys, and we will see you next week.